Still October, still Halloween season, and right now the big ticket item in theaters is, I guess, Terrifier 3. But I'm not watching that, so instead we'll settle for Smile 2. I like the first one a decent amount. I never quite saw all the negatives some people saw in the first Smile movie. I didn't think it was too reliant on boring jump scares. I thought some of them were quite good. Thought it was solid technically, some interesting choices there. I didn't think it was great. It wasn't one of my favorite movies or even one of my favorite horror movies, but I thought it was perfectly serviceable for what it was. I heard that, the second Smile movie coming out, which is already, sequels are already dubious. Plus, it was already going to be even longer than the first movie, which was almost 2 hours, made me a little bit nervous. Here it is. It's in theaters. People are watching it. So far, it seems to be getting slightly better reception than the previous one. Time will tell, I guess, once more people see it. Here's a synopsis. About to embark on a new world tour, global pop sensation Sky Riley begins experiencing increasingly terrifying and inexplicable events. Overwhelmed by the escalating horrors and pressures of fame, Sky is forced to face her dark past to regain control of her life before it spirals out of control. Start non-spoiler before touching on a few specific things. The general recommendation, I think, is if you're looking for pure intensity, the pure quantity of constructed horror scenes and horror moments, some visceral horror, this is perhaps a movie that'll be up your alley because there are a lot of things, a lot of horror scenes in it. So, it might be perfect for spooky season for some people. For me, though, I think there's a lot of problems here. As much as the quantity of scary scenes can be a positive, I think this movie is too long and has too many scenes to be truly effective. I mean, that's to say this movie, I think, has a dynamics problem. It really feels like there is no break. The movie is basically just going full intensity almost the entire time, save for a little bit of story build up after the intro. And I could, you could say that's a good thing in some ways. You want some amount of intensity. You want perhaps to feel like the demon is truly after her inside her mind, making us feel the panic that she feels and her helplessness. Truly, though, there's a limit to how much you can force into this movie without desensitizing the audience. I want to draw a weird comparison kind of to Hereditary, where that's a movie that's known for its intensity. It's known for some specific moments that really stick out, for being very scary to a lot of people, a little bit traumatic to some people. But really, in my mind, that movie rides on a couple of specific big moments. That movie is not littered with tragedies, at least not on the same scale, right? There's gradations in terms of the bad things or the depressing things that happen. There are peaks and valleys, there are dynamics, right? There are crescendo moments. You come away from those moments and they leave ripples that affect things in smaller, less intense ways, but the echo of the big moments stay. And so that's how that movie, Hereditary, gets a lot of mileage out of relatively few insane, big crescendo moments. I think that's a big contrast to this movie where, to me, it feels like basically every horror scene is just big crescendo moment, worst thing ever. Next scene, another worst thing ever, another big crescendo moment. And I think it just wears off. The effect is gone after probably halfway through, honestly. After maybe half the movie, I just felt I don't know, what am I watching? It's just the same thing. You use the tricks and then you reuse the tricks. I'll touch on the tricks in a second, but to me, it wears off. It gets comedic just because of how hard they're going for it. And I know that seems weird that this movie could come across as comedic, but to me, every time they introduced a new thing, a new terrible thing that happens, I'm just oh my gosh, we're doing this again? I don't know, man. I think of another comparison, another kind of weird comparison on the surface as Wreck, the found footage horror movie, which is obviously much different. But the comparison to me is that's a movie that is I think 75 minutes for one of the two versions, the faster one. That movie is very high percentage intensity. There are, very long takes that are just immersing you in the movie's environment, which is another similarity to Smile 2, which has a number of longer takes, again, to immerse you in a situation, make you feel trapped, make you feel anxious. A lot of Wreck is all go, a lot of intensity, a lot of talking. But that movie is 75 minutes. And not only that movie has a very distinct break in it that lets you relax, lets you reset a little bit, lets you, again, grow some sensitization to big things happening. And I think that's something this movie desperately needs, especially being almost an hour longer than Wreck. You need downtime. You need time for the audience to readjust to the big things you're trying to throw at them. And this movie really, it needs breaks. It needs smaller things that happen. So I mentioned the tricks earlier. The movie's main gimmick, and this was the case in the first one too, I suppose. One of the gripes I had with the first one too. So in general, this may be a me thing, but I do not love the like imagined horror, the nothing is real kind of idea. Not just in this movie, there are other movies that do it. I think Oculus is like the first one that comes to mind. I don't love it in that movie either. Those kinds of movies where the villain makes the hero see something that doesn't exist at any given moment, basically. The rug can be pulled out, and whatever we just saw didn't matter, just in their head. It matters because it's their perception, of course. But to me, this it just feels like something that removes a lot of stakes. As an audience member, you know that if that's in the movie, it might just not be worth getting invested in that thing you're watching. It might just get pulled out from under you. It might, in a way, not every way, not matter. So to me, especially when like this is something the whole movie essentially revolves around. Like this is a part of pretty much every horror scene. And again, it's just something you get desensitized to. Like if it happens a few times, if it's in a shorter movie and there are fewer scenes like that, then yeah, I have certainly been caught by surprise. I've like forgotten mid movie, right? That is the gimmick, and I've been caught by surprise. But again, if it's every scene and there are this many scenes, it's so difficult not to just know, oh, that's the trick. That's going to be the trick again. These moments I think are not creative enough that the intrigue becomes, oh, how are they going to do it this time? You just kind of know, like, we're going to do the thing again. It's just the desensitization again. There are too many of these moments. I get the temptation in sequels is to go bigger. This movie clearly has more budget, more production value, which is a plus that I'll get to later. But I think it gives into the temptation to just get bigger, just do more things, just throw more at you, more yelling, more screaming. It's a very loud movie. The jump scares are also very loud. It just loses the middle ground where it's just things that are just kind of unnerving, things that are worrisome. Those to me get lost in this movie. It's all big, it's all bad. It's just very tiring, and eventually I just got so sick of it. So there are some positives, I think, in things like art direction, general art department, I suppose. There is a lot of gore in this movie. It's pretty gross. I have a relatively low tolerance, I suppose, for super violent stuff. I don't really like extremely violent movies. Why I'm not watching Terrifier 3. So this is realistically more gross than I'm generally comfortable with, especially broken bones. I hate broken bones. Compound fractures are like my worst fear. But regardless, I mean, they were effective, I think. They certainly made me squirm, made me feel uncomfortable. Some of them are, more realistic than others or whatever, but I mean, this is a movie about, demon possession that's in her head, so it's not like they have to be super grounded. That part of the movie works. It feels like that's a side effect of the increased budget. I'm assuming an increased budget. I think that's a place where production value shows up. Another place, I like the general, pop aesthetic. The costumes are fun. I'm not 100% sure what all the criteria are for good costumes, but to me, it seemed like they were, they didn't look cheap. They looked authentic to a pop star identity, I suppose. The fashion she wears, like some of her weird hoodies, seem kind of like, weird rich person fashion choices in a certain way that feels authentic. Her apartment, I think, has some fun decoration choices. There are parts of it that feel a little bit like clashy, like the giant flower wall in her bedroom plus the zebra carpet, that weird pink light in her bathroom. To me, they don't feel continuous, but I think that's fine for a character who's trying to find her way, who is a little bit of a mess, that her apartment is rich and pretty, but it also has like these weird clashes stylistically. So I think that's fun. I think that works. Few specific things I want to touch on for spoilers. This is maybe a silly question, but it just kind of got me thinking. When you're trying to get like sponsorship for a movie, I wonder how the conversation goes. Specifically for Voss in this case, where they provide all like the water bottles that she is. They're so prominent for her character. I almost wonder like, were they approached by Voss to say like, hey, we want to sponsor Smile 2 or whatever? Parker Finn's thinking like, okay, what can I like write a scene with glass bottles? Is that going to work somewhere? Or is that like, he was already thinking, okay, I need a glass something for this one scene. Should I hey, go reach out to companies, see if we can find someone to sponsor? And Voss is like, hey, I'm your guy. I'm just kind of curious about that part of the movie making process. More related to the actual movie, though. I do like the idea of incorporating the dance choreography into that one scene in her apartment with like the 20 different figures coming after her, dancing after her, like the Weeping Angels style. It is, I don't know how well it works overall, I think to me, that scene is too clean. It looks too clean to be perfectly effective. Maybe it's just like the way everything is like lit so well, lit so evenly. You can see all of the dancers so well. I think that just makes it look a little bit too goofy because you're just a bit too aware that this is a bunch of dancers, a bunch of actors just stacked on top of each other in a weird way that I think overrides the potential fear that the scene could provide. But it's close. I like the idea. I like the creativity. I like the incorporation of the pop stuff into her fears. I mentioned that this movie has several pretty impressive longer takes. People love the intro. It's understandable. I actually, unfortunately, arrived at the movie a couple minutes late, so I missed part of the opening. But I have heard the friend I was watching it with loved it. I've heard several other people praise it as being the best part of the movie. There are some nice sound moments. A little one that I really liked was towards the beginning. There's a moment where like her hairbrush gets caught on her hair and it's just like tugging. I thought that sound was like really perfect and just like a little bit painful as you can hear it like catching, and of course it's foreshadowing for later. I also liked the sound specifically of like the metal plate hitting what's his name, Lewis, I think, Lewis's face. It just has like a great metallic ring at the end of it that feels very authentic. I think the ending in the Pizza Hut is probably the best scene. It is less overtly jump scary. It is more menacing. I think of all the people who are creepily smiling in the movie, that girl, car crash, it's probably the same person, I guess, but it's hard to tell under all the blood and junk. She does a good job. She has the creepiest smile, I think. I don't know. Does anyone like the ending? Is that good? It's just so weird, especially when we see Lewis, who is, you know, towards the end of his rope, about to hit the end of his rope. When we see him in his apartment, he is acting insane. Apparently, he had been acting insane, posting stuff on social media about seeing things in the corner. So then we cut back to reality, and apparently Sky has been living life while, like, invisibly while we were in the dream world in her head or whatever. I don't know. To me, that just leaves so many questions. Like, maybe the implication is that no one cares about her well-being really as long as she's still able to get on stage. That certainly is reinforced in her head by some of her mom's attitude and whatnot. So that could be the point, but I just think that raises way too many story questions at once for what is basically the middle of the climax. So I just think it's an awkward spot. Like, maybe if it had popped her out a little bit earlier, before she actually was out on stage, giving her, and really us, the audience, a minute or two to digest what was happening, and maybe clear some of those uncertainties before we really launch into the final moments. Maybe that would work better, but of course that would make the movie longer. So I don't know. A bold choice, I guess, but I think the specific implementation was not great. But yeah, I mean, you can tell I'm not the big fan of it, even though there are things to appreciate. I think it's very possible that this director or writer will be able to come up with something good in the future. I have hope from Smile, although I do wonder, I kind of want to rewatch Smile to see if some of these criticisms also apply to Smile, and I just didn't pick up on it the first time, but whatever. I think he's clearly talented. I hope he can continue to make movies, make something good. I hope Smile 2 makes more money so we can do, you know, a new IP or whatever. That was it for Smile. It's not for me, definitely not for me, but I wouldn't be surprised if people continue to enjoy it in some way or another. And then also, same day I saw Rumours. Rumours is why I got to Smile late, actually. En route to the annual G7 summit, the 7 leaders of the world's wealthiest liberal democracies get lost in the woods and face increasing peril while attempting to draft a provisional statement regarding a global crisis. This movie doesn't have the craziest themes ever. Pretty straightforward, especially by the ending. But I have a soft spot for movies with well-worn messages that are delivered in a unique way, and I think that's this movie. This is something of a surrealist comedy. The comedy often arises from strange situations and character idiosyncrasies. There are certainly dialogue setups and punchlines too. To me, a lot of the humor is the strange general atmosphere surrounding everyone, surrounding the events, the environments, all that. Surrealism is all over the, you know, dreamy, illogical sorts of actions, processes, even the aesthetic. There are obviously certain set pieces which are very surreal, certain plot elements, very surreal, and then the aesthetic, the lighting, and whatnot as we go along. Because the movie starts out looking nicely serene, peaceful, naturally colored, and then the lighting gets a little more specifically colorful, apocalyptic, and as does one of the settings, really. So I like that visual progression. The movie has a certain amount of, like, wacky, maybe not goofy, we'll just say wacky, unique, strange ideas and set pieces. but it all feels right. It all feels like dream logic, dream world type of situation. If you're interested in like a kind of strange movie, a odd journey, would absolutely recommend this movie. It's Guy Madden, who is well known for making some sort of unorthodox movies. This is my first of his. I will be watching more after this. Although I am kind of curious what percentage of this movie was his, what percentage was his two collaborators, co-directors. My favorite aspect is probably the score, actually, which is used at some point for even humor, like right at the very beginning. Some point it's just beautiful music, like that sax piece that's over like the bed of synths. I think it's used towards the beginning, maybe start of Act 2 or something. Good performances. Each country feels like a unique character, their own character. And while they're not, fleshed out in extreme detail, they feel distinct. They feel like their idiosyncrasies are enough to carry the movie, more or less. A few spoiler notes. Did not expect the masturbating bog zombies. My assumption is, because there's this line, I believe when they first look at the body in the grave still, I believe it's something about the bodies being of leaders who were killed, something to that effect. I couldn't write it down in time. So my assumption is those bog zombies are essentially the ghosts of leaders past, who wind up being essentially a dead audience that this new generation of leaders is playing to at the very end of the speech, right? There are no regular people, none of the people who they are theoretically supposed to be helping, reassuring. They are sending out this kind of like false bravado, this speech that is, a bunch of nonsense cobbled together on top of an AI generated script. And they are just sending it out. Maxine is giving it his all, but it's meaningless. It's not falling on the people. People are not hearing it. It's only the leaders just essentially masturbating to their own type, archetype, whatever you see it. So I kind of like that touch. I think it works that way. It is another part of the strange dreamlike logic of the movie. While the movie is memorable, it's funny, it has a specifically unique aesthetic, I think there are chunks of it that feel pretty empty, pretty purposeless. At times, you're very aware that they're mostly just walking around, not really doing anything. I wonder how much of the movie is improv, because some of it could be attributed to that. Just like not very good improv where they had general directions, and what ended up in the movie was just weak to me. But even just generally, I would be curious if all of this was scripted out or if they had to come up with these interactions on the fly to some degree. And also, I think there are a lot of sequences visually where you just have a series of cut together reaction shots. It's just like one country, next country, next country, like in half a second. And I think those moments are pretty visually stale, and that I think helps contribute to the feeling that reminds you that they're pretty much just walking around. So there are moments like that that feel pretty lifeless, but despite that, I think most of the movie is quite strong and well worth watching, even if it might be a bit long. Would recommend this if you have the chance to see it. I love unique visions. I love unique movies, things that make me think a little bit. I think this fits the bill. This is a unique movie worth watching. So that was the theater weekend this week. I will do one more Halloween video, I suppose, and then maybe I'll do some noir videos for Noirvember. But we'll see. Hope you enjoyed this video. See you in the next one. I'm just going to record this real quick because I watched MadS on Shudder a couple days after I went to the theater for those. And I'm just recording this like stream of consciousness minutes after watching the movie. Kind of blown away. Extremely impressive movie. If you get a chance to watch this before you hear much about it, before you know what its main draw is, you could say, or its main achievement is, I would absolutely recommend it because it's a fun treat to discover and then enjoy as you go along, I think, without knowing anything about it beforehand. This movie is extremely impressively put together and coordinated. It is a unique entry in its specific subgenres, like the drug stuff, especially. You can tell from the synopsis that's its main focus already, so I don't mind talking about that. The way the actors get drug symptoms and things like that across, I think, are very nice. It has a unique sort of identity. I won't say anything more than that. This is just a really quick recommendation. The movie probably deserves its own video. It deserves its own behind the scenes and everything like that. So I hope there is a physical release for it, which Shudder is usually pretty good about. And I hope that there is plenty about it on there because I would love to learn more about what this movie did.